All right, we are back with section 3 for Tuesday the 16th. And when we stopped, we were halfway through the section about police departments. And we will start there with that one sentence that's in the middle of this section, starting with the word in. In some major cities, leaders are considering changes. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said on June 3rd he would cut money from the Los Angeles Police Department. He will direct $250 million towards programs for health care and jobs. At most, $150 million would come from the police department. So here is a definite plan for defunding by at least $150 million taken from the police departments and put towards healthcare programs and other new jobs. Now the question comes to mind is, okay, I see how you're going to do it here, how you're going to defund, but then what happens to the policemen who are now out of work? That's a concern. Will you try to create positions in the community that they might be able to fill in some kind of new types of job? Perhaps security services. I don't know what possibilities there might be, but that is a consideration that comes to my mind as a citizen. Certainly, I'm in favor of more health programs because oftentimes the problems that create crime in our streets come from people who are unwell, particularly when it comes to addictions, and more programs, more help in that regard could reduce the number of people on the streets who cause trouble. So more health care, I'm very much in favor of. In Portland, Oregon, leaders agreed on June 4th to remove police officers from the city's schools. They will move more than $1 million into community programs. Okay, we have another idea here, another way that someone says, here's how we're going to defund. We're going to take the city's police officers, the ones who are in the schools, we're going to take them out of the schools, and we're going to use that money to create community programs. Okay, so now that leaves schools without police officers. Will they replace those police officers with a lesser trained security type person? Someone who doesn't have the credentials that a police officer would have, but they could manage security? Will they put money into security systems, metal detectors and cameras and these kinds of things, so that they would not necessarily have to have a live person? Wanting to put the money into community programs is a wonderful idea. Programs that provide for a place for children to go after school if they have no adult supervision in their neighborhoods, their communities, places where young mothers might go to find information to learn how to be a good caregiver for their children. Some of these things are hard for us to imagine. Those of us who live in suburban Atlanta, we don't see a lot of these kinds of problems on a daily basis. We don't really think about, parents who have many children who are not particularly wanted and have no idea how to care for them, how to teach them and train them as they grow older. That's hard to imagine, but it exists, doesn't it? And community programs are often one answer to dealing with those problems. All right, continuing, fixing a system that isn't working. Defunding the police department, excuse me, I just lost my spot. Defunding the police departments is a powerful, I shall start over again, second time here. Defunding the police departments is a popular idea at a difficult time. It is not always what people really want for their communities, though. The idea is complex. In October, leaders in D.C. talked about how to make sure children are safe on their walks to and from school. The talk happened after students in the area were killed on their way home. Students said they wanted more officers present on their routes. They also said they hated seeing police cars outside of the schools. All right. Kind of interesting that the students say, they want to see the officers on the police routes, on their walking routes, but they didn't like to see police cars outside of schools. It sounds, like these children are in areas where there needs to be security everywhere. But they really do need to make sure that these children get home safely, whether it's walking or by bus, that their ride home is as safe as their time in the school building. It is our commitment to end policing as we know it and recreate systems of public safety that actually keep us safe, Lisa Bender said. She is the Minneapolis City Council president. It is clear that our existing system of policing and public safety isn't working. All right. So I have so many feelings about this, as you have maybe been able to guess already. And I suppose that you may also, I'm sure it's a different, a different feel for you, since many of you have not been here a long time and you may not be here permanently, so there's a different sense. However, I suppose that some of these thoughts would be in your mind in your countries as well, because of situations that are being dealt with in your homes of origin. I don't know what is the right thing, but I do think that it is always good to evaluate and reevaluate systems, organizations, how we do what we do, because what worked at one point in time may not continue to work well over a long period of time. There need to be changes. We have to adapt to what's going on in the world around us. What do our citizens tell us about what they need in the way of policing? Let's listen to what we're hearing in the community. Let's use our eyes. What are we seeing in the community around us? It's also very different depending on, and this idea of beyond the cities, where we live. Here in my neighborhood of Johns Creek, and my zip code also covers Duluth, so it's I kind of live in both. I do not see a lot of day-to-day crime. Certainly things happen. I read about them, and there are things that go on that should not go on. But in terms of if you're comparing to inner city Atlanta, our crime rate is very low. So I feel in general that the police department of Johns Creek is doing a very adequate job. I'm not aware of any police brutality or excessive force. It certainly could have happened, but it's not something that is a big issue among those of us who are residents in this area. I don't know that there's a need to defund this police department. There might be some things that they could change and move some funding to other areas, but I don't think the need is great. But I do think that if I lived in inner city areas in Chicago or Atlanta or Detroit or DC, I might have an entirely different viewpoint. So it's kind of difficult for me to feel qualified to say what any particular city should or shouldn't do. The only thing that I can say is I see some possible benefits to this. I see some areas where it could be a bit of a problem, particularly if many policemen lose their jobs. We have a whole new problem, don't we? I see other pros and cons, as I've mentioned, as we've gone along. But I can only really advocate as a citizen from where I sit. I can only advocate that we always need to examine our systems in every organization, that whether it's a public organization, whether it's a private company, it doesn't really matter. We always need to be looking at how we do what we do and can we do it better, and then we need to adjust. So I hope this has been helpful, as there's been so much news and it's a very distressing time. I'm sorry that you have had to experience it here in your time in Atlanta. I really wish that weren't the case, but I hope that maybe you'll see some positive things happen, and that you will feel somewhat better after a while. I hope we all do. All right, thank you for sharing that with me. And we are going to now switch gears, as I so often say, and we're going to do several phrasal verbs today. This is the last week of lessons, so I feel like, oh my goodness, we're only in the letter P for phrasal verbs. We've gotten halfway through, and we do a lot every couple of weeks or 3 weeks, but now there's a whole lot that we haven't done. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to choose some for us to look at today. All right, you might want to have your list available. If not, that's all right. I'm going to turn to the board, erase, and then I will be using the board. All right, so we're in P, and I'm going to start with pick out. All right, I'm guessing that this one might be familiar to you. When we pick something out, we choose, excuse me, I'm going to move this little cart that I keep this on. Okay. When we pick something out, we choose something. All right. So we pick out our favorite flavor of ice cream or something of that sort. Right. We also might pick out a person from a group. I'm looking at a large group of people. I want to pick out a lady in a red coat who I'm supposed to meet up with, okay? So I'm going to pick her out of this large crowd, right? So you might use it in that way as well. All right, and then that sort of works along with this one. Point out, all right? Sometimes we point out a particular thing that we choose or want or need. We point out a person in a crowd that we're looking for, right? Now, I will say that we often tell our children, it's not polite to point. Don't point at people, okay? And in general, that's true. We don't particularly want to point and make someone feel uncomfortable. But there are times that we need to point something out. If you are the guide on a trip in travel or something, your guide points things out all along the way, right? And that's a necessary thing. All right. Then we're going to move to put. We're going to start with put down. Okay. Obviously, we put things down on a table, whatever. We tell a child, put that down if they're holding something they're not supposed to hold. So put down. But we also can put people down. Putting someone down is to insult them, okay? Which is not a very kind thing to do. We might hear someone put another person down. We wouldn't do it ourselves, right? But we might hear someone put someone down, say, oh, I can't stand her. She is a know-it-all, all right? Something like that. They have insulted her reputation. They have put her down. Some people directly put other people down. They will look right at you and say something unkind. I saw a video the other day of someone in a store who was putting down a lady of a different cultural background. I think it was a white woman, and she was insulting a Hispanic woman, I think, and just to her face, saying the most unkind things. So this is a negative idea to put a person down. All right. Put off is an interesting one. It has a couple of different uses. One is we put something off that we don't want to do. It's kind of like we postpone. So I keep putting off going to the grocery store because I don't want to go, all right? So we physically put something off. We can put off another person. Somebody at work really wants to meet with us, and we know what the meeting is going to be about, and we don't want to talk about it right now. And they keep saying, can you meet today? I'd like to meet at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Is that good? And you keep putting them off. You keep saying, no, that's not a good time, or I'd like to wait till next week. Okay? So we can put someone off in that way. The other way that we put people off is by our behavior. If someone is perhaps being rude or behaving in a way that makes you uncomfortable or you feel is improper, you can say, I'm very put off by your behavior, or I was very put off by what so-and-so did. This is a little bit more of a vague use of put off, but you will occasionally hear it. I was very put off by the way our boss spoke to us in the meeting this morning. And it really has nothing to do with postponing anything, okay? Delaying anything. It has to do with being somewhat irritated and displeased about how another person has behaved toward you or has behaved in general. Okay? All right. Put out. All right. We'll talk about putting out a fire, extinguishing a fire. That's a huge word. Extinguishing. This is one of those where that UI says extinguishing. So when we put something out, such as a fire, we put it out. If we hear an argument occurring between our children, we might step in and go, stop, let's talk about this, and essentially work things out. And you could say, I just put that out. I put out that fire. Okay, it was an imaginary fire, not literal, but it was an argument. The argument has now been put out. All right, and then we have put together. And this one is familiar for sure, because we've all had to put together things that we maybe purchase and have to build almost a little piece of furniture in our home or something of that sort. We call that assembling. We assemble things, we put them together. The other thing we put together might be an event. I'm going to put together a party and you are all invited, okay? Or let's put together a nice presentation for the graduates, all right? It means we're going to, again, the idea of assembling, but we're not assembling things so much as we are the parts of an event put together. All right, and then the next one is a fun one. Put up with. Put up with something. Put up with someone. When we put up with something, it means that we tolerate it. We may not love it. We probably don't love it, but we put up with it. This makes me always think about the neighbor with the dog that barks all the time. We don't want to make our neighbor mad, so we don't say anything to our neighbor. We just put up with it, right? If you have a coworker who talks too much, but you don't want to hurt his feelings, you put up with it, all right? So it usually doesn't mean we're real happy about it, but we do it anyway. All right, I need to pause.